Welcome to the Secret Podcast. My name is George. I'm your host. I'm here with Brett and David Steele. David Steele, you may not know if you're just in the secret community. David Steele is the vice president of the Great U.S. Treasure Hunt, which is a treasure hunt that's been put out recently. It's gotten a lot of publicity lately, and a lot of that publicity sent visitors to 12 Treasures. And because of a very specific article that was written, we decided to have David on the show to ask a couple of questions.
Absolutely. So, Dave, we're super fired up to talk to you. And as George mentioned, we got some traffic to our site that raised our eyebrows, and we were like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And then we happened along a path that led to you, and we're fired up to have you.
Awesome.
And as you know, we're big fans of just treasure hunts. You know, typically we talk about The Secret, but we also talk about other treasure hunts too. And this one is super exciting. We wanted to make sure that we talk to you because there's some inspiration that you got from our favorite treasure hunt of all time. So so why don't you start out? Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the hunt, a little bit of background for the book and where it came from, and we'll start there.
Sure. Well, it's called The Great U.S. Treasure Hunt. All the clues are in an ebook that you can order exclusively on Amazon, less than $10. All the clues are text-based, so there aren't any elaborate drawings. One of the great features of The Secret, of course, are the spectacular paintings, but we couldn't afford spectacular paintings, so we decided let's just go all text-based. So you don't have a book that'll be delivered to your house. It'll be on your Amazon Kindle, or if you basically have any e-reader, you can get it there at Amazon. The hunt launched November 13th. Yes, it was a Friday, so lucky Friday the 13th was our launch date.
Perfect.
We just had our first winner. We have 4 proxy items that are hidden in 4 different states in the lower 48, except California. Sorry, California, you're not in the hunt this time. You can certainly win if you're from California, but we didn't hide anything in California. So we had our first winner on December 20th. A lady in Pittsburgh named Beth Hovanek actually decoded Chapter 4 using one-hit wonder songs. And the titles and the artists of those songs. She decoded the message: North Vegas, El Dorado Bench, Silver Z. And no matter where you are in the country, if you hit Google and hit North Vegas, El Dorado, well, now a news story might pop up because we hit the news for this. But before the big news story, if you had Googled North Vegas El Dorado bench, you would have ended up at El Dorado Park in North Las Vegas, where a Silver Z had been sticking under a bench for almost 10 years. And I'm sure we'll cover that later as well. But she won $10,000. She called a friend. She used her phone a friend option. Beth did. She knew a friend that lived in North Vegas, less than 5 miles from the park. And said, "Can you go find this item? It's under a bench. It's a Silver Z." Her name was Nancy Zitko. And at 7 a.m., she went out there, found the Silver Z that had been clinging to the underside of this bench for almost 10 years. And they became the first winning team. Nancy will get $1,000. Wow. And Beth gets the solver's share of $9,000 for a total of $10,000.
That's incredible. That usually there's not that sort of a bounty to find. So that's really that's a lot. That's great. How fun.
You know, we did set it up so that it wouldn't be just a one-shot thing. With so many armchair treasure hunts that people kind of do it themselves. We've put together a little investor team, and we've got $40,000 up as prize money, but we didn't want to do a one-shot thing where it was, okay, one item and now you're done, and now we've got to put something else together. So That's why we thought, well, originally we were going to do 10, We had 10 locations, 10 different methods of solving. And then last year with the thing that came along, I'm not even going to say what it was, everyone knows.
Thank you.
We had to scale back a lot. And so we cut it down to 4. We're hoping to do 6 this summer. So we'll bring back our original 10, the 4 that we've already done. And then we've got 6 other locations and 6 other chapters that are already written. This is a book. It's a 10-chapter book. And we kind of just had to cut it off at chapter 4. So each chapter has a unique solution. Chapter 4 has been solved, but chapters 1, 2, and 3 are still out there.
So there's more to be found. Love it.
More to be found.
So this hunt's a lot different than The Secret. It's got a lot of things that I really like. One of the things that I especially like about this hunt is looking at Beth's solution. There's no wiggle room in it, right? With The Secret, there's a whole lot of interpretation. You interpret a verse, you interpret a painting, and then maybe it's here, maybe it's there. The solution really depends on how you interpret art. But with this, it's very, very cut and dry. Was that sort of intentional for you guys?
Oh, absolutely. And I love The Secret. I'm old enough to have read it when it first came out. I lived in Southern California at the time, and I saw that painting of the genie coming up out of the sand, and I thought, oh, maybe that's the Aladdin Hotel. And I zipped off to Las Vegas on a whim, just me, because I was the only one I knew of my friends that was crazy enough to do something like that. And of course, it wasn't anywhere near the Aladdin Hotel. In fact, the Aladdin Hotel doesn't even exist anymore. But I thought, well, I'll go out and take a shot at it. But that's one of the things that we wanted to avoid when we did this treasure hunt, is that we didn't want it to be up in the air. So when you decode the message, North Vegas, El Dorado bench, and you Google that phrase, it's not going to be North Las Vegas, New Mexico. It's going to be North Las Vegas, Nevada. And there's an El Dorado Park in North Las Vegas. So it's got to be El Dorado Park.
Yeah.
And then you just have to go and find the right bench. And there's only about 7 or 8 benches in the park. Run your hand along, underneath the bench, and you'll find that silver Z, or at least you would have until December 20th.
That's amazing. And then apparently somebody else did find it before Nancy found it, right?
There were groups that were hot on the trail. There are many groups that are kind of pooling their resources and trying to decode these things. And we do recommend that if you think you have a solution, send us an email to thegreatustreasurehunt@gmail.com. We don't want you to spend your money running off to Cincinnati if you think something's in Cincinnati and you're in Southern California, you're in Florida, you're in Texas. We don't want you to book a trip to Cincinnati. Send us your solution, and we'll tell you whether or not
it's viable.
You might be wasting your time. Now, you can't just say, is it in California? Is it in Texas? Is it in Cincinnati? It has to be the actual solution. And if you decode the solution, send it to us, and we'll tell you whether or not you're wasting your time.
Let me ask you this, because it was chapter 4 that was solved, if I'm remembering correctly,
right.
But because the solution to that was so cut and dry,
right.
And because if you had decoded that, you would know automatically that you were correct.
Sure.
There really wouldn't be a reason. I mean, there wouldn't be any doubt. You wouldn't have to really email you. Did you get anything that seemed like it might be viable from people before the actual solution was sent? Do you see what I'm saying? Did anybody come up with anything creative that was just totally off the mark?
Sure. What people will do is they'll put their own biases into a solution. We have one guy who insists on sending us solutions that involve Oklahoma, and he lives in Oklahoma. So we, at one point, we replied to his email after about his 5th attempt, and we said, "You really just want to go see these sites in Oklahoma, right?" In other words,
yes.
just, in his mind, he's coming up, okay, it's the Will Rogers Museum. That's where he's going to go visit today. And people try to shoehorn in things. But no, you're really decoding a message. And in this case, we used the one-hit wonder songs and artists, and you needed the initials of so for let's say, for example, if you had Afternoon Delight by Starland Vocal Band, that would give you an A or an S. Afternoon Delight, Starland Vocal, A or S. And then let's say the next one-hit wonder was In the Year 2525 by Zager and Evans. That's an I or a Z. Now your first letter is going to be A or S. Your next letter is going to be I or Z. And then you go on from there. So if you eliminate one of two letters, the way that the way that Beth had solved it was she wrote all of these things down in a column. And then she went down the column and picked her way. Okay, well, there's an N, there's an O, there's an R. Oh, there's a T, there's an H. Okay, that spells north. Okay, what's next? V. Oh, there's a V and a G. Is that going to be Vegas? V-E-G-A-S. Oh, yeah. Oh, North Vegas. So she picked her way through the message. But we actually had, I think, 4 different groups who, once the hint was given out, they had pretty much nailed it. So because we give hints every 30 days if someone hasn't solved something, unlike many other treasure hunts, we want things to be solved fairly quickly.
And you do those on the Facebook page, right? Or the different social media?
Twitter, and YouTube will, and the website, thegreatustreasurehunt.com, although the more active ones are Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where we put the hints out. Now, we'll tweet a lot, but those tweets are not hints. They're just tweets. So if you do follow us on Twitter, and it's at Great US Treasure, you'll see us tweeting all the time. Those are not hints. And of course, treasure hunters think everything's a hint. So they're not.
Of course.
The actual next hint will come up, I think it's January 19th. So Beth and Nancy, so we had 3 or 4 different, I think 3 groups were there in Vegas, ready to have people, boots on the ground, as they say. And they had, people had sent us emails, and one person was way too far away, didn't have a partner, couldn't make it. And so via email, we said, this looks like a great solution, but unless you have a partner in Vegas, you shouldn't book the flight, because we didn't want to say to them, someone else has already solved it. But the fact is that we had at least three or 4 different people with the correct solution. So the team of Nancy and Beth was one of these teams. Nancy was in Vegas. Beth was in Pittsburgh. Nancy's the one that ended up finding it. And so I flew out to Vegas because I knew that someone was going to be there. So we flew there, met her the next day. It kind of blew up on the news. The local news had been running the story for almost 24 hours straight. And then when I talked to Nancy, I got the details of how she found it. Came out about 7 a.m, just ran her fingers under the benches, felt it, pulled it out. I told her, this thing has been under here for at least 8 years, because I would visit the World Series of Poker every once in a while. I had it in the back of my mind. I'm going to do a treasure hunt someday. I put that thing there 8 or 9 years ago. I don't even remember the exact date. And I said to her, it's almost a miracle that this thing is still under this bench, because this is a public park. It's under a gazebo. It's a picnic bench. Any little kid could have come by in 7 or 8 years, been crawling underneath here and gone, oh, look, a shiny Z. Let's get it. And she agreed. She said, yeah, that could have happened. Well, that night I got a text message from her, and then I called her. She was playing bingo with friends, I guess it is, wherever you can play bingo still in Las Vegas. And the lady sitting across from her says, hey, you're that lady on the news that found that Z in the park. And she says, yes, I am. She says, my grandson was crawling under that bench and said, oh, look, I see this thing under this bench. And I told him, don't touch it, it's dirty. So literally that night, she meets someone, a good grandma, who knew enough to say, don't touch that nasty thing under the bench. Otherwise, she never would have found it. It would have been in some, 4 or 5-year-old's hand, and she would not have found it. So almost a miracle.
That is
And then
crazy.
another thing, she said she is destined to find it, and I believe it, because her last name is Zitko, starts with a Z. Her first name is Nancy, starts with an N. What does a Z look like when you turn it sideways? It looks like an N. So the thing that she found that had been there for 8 years, that the grandmother had shooed the grandson away from, could be read as NZ or Nancy Zitko. So it's just, if you wrote it in a screenplay, they would say, okay, we're going to have to remove one of these elements because this whole thing is not believable. There's too many things here that are unbelievable. So let's at least take out one of these elements.
That is crazy. That is just crazy. And how fun is that? So, and what were there? So Beth did not fly out, right? Just met Nancy.
No, she was in Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh area. So she, times being what they are, and also time being of the essence. When you solve something and it's that obvious, that delay of, hey, let's book a flight a day or two from now. It's going to be gone probably by the time the time you get there.
Right.
So yeah, she had just called Nancy. Nancy came over. And somehow the Pittsburgh press got word of the story and called Beth at home. And so we made Pittsburgh news, we made Las Vegas news on 3 different channels. And so, it's not like it was on CNN or anything, but it did kind of go nationwide. And that's, I guess, how it got back to you guys. One of those threads worked its way back to you, because I think one of the stories mentioned you guys. So it's great.
Yeah, it wasn't on CNN or anything, but you did make Newsweek, which was kind of nice.
pretty.
I mean, 15 years ago, making Newsweek would have been something. Nowadays,
still, it's it's a nice little thing to hang your hat on. I've been a Newsweek.
Yeah,
have you?
Exactly.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: you got started in puzzles a long time. Obviously when The Secret came out, I think I remember reading that you were really interested in the Masquerade, as well.
Oh yeah.
What was it about those puzzles, especially back in the late 70s, the early 80s? What was it that drew you to those puzzles?
Well, as a kid, I've just always, even as a kid, I loved puzzles. I loved anagrams, crosswords, just unusual puzzles. I was into chess for a little while. And so anything that isn't solved that can be solved, that's, kind of attractive to me, and has been my whole life. So I heard about Masquerade when it first came out on whatever news outlet, probably Newsweek back then. And so then when The Secret came out, I thought, oh, wow, okay, here's another one of these things like Masquerade. Great paintings, a story, poems, you have to decode things. It looked really fun. But then once I got the book and zipped out there to Vegas, I then realized, okay, this is going to be way harder than I think it's going to be. And then I also kind of put 2 and 2 together at the time and thought, you know what? I'm going to need to be in the place where these treasures are, or I'm not going to be able to find them.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be able to do this from Orange County, California, because just the nature of the puzzles. Now with the internet and Google Maps and Google Earth, and you can do everything on the internet, it's a lot less likely now. I mean, it's a lot more likely now that someone could solve them, one of the puzzles from somewhere else. Was it Chicago? Was solved by someone that lives in Chicago. Boston by Boston.
Yeah.
So it's, but it's become less likely now that that's a restriction. Now I think you could solve it from 2,000 miles away.
Yeah, maybe this year we'll find out.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's one of the elements that I wanted to make sure that was in our treasure hunt, that you could solve it from 2,000 miles away, because you're going to, when you decode the message in whatever way you decode it, it's going to spell out an exact location.
Yeah.
And even nowadays, even with the thing, if you can't leave the house and you're 2,000 miles away, there are plenty of resources online where you can find someone that will search for you, like Beth did with Nancy. if it's in Cincinnati and you're not in Cincinnati, you can go online, you can find someone who's a hunter or a searcher, and you can tell them, hey, it's in this exact location. They don't have to know the exact solution. You've got the exact solution. But as long as they know where they're going, they're still going to find it. And that way you're not risking your, the full $9,000 solver's share.
Yeah. And
because you can tell someone exactly where to go, but they don't know what the exact decoded message is.
Right. And I think that's one of the rules. Even if you only have the proxy, you still only get $1,000. You have to know the solution for the 9,000.
You can tell someone, go to North Las Vegas, go to El Dorado Park, search under all the benches. You're going to find a silver I or a silver Z, something like that. But it's, you're going to find it. Now, they don't have they may find the Z, they would find it, but they don't have North Vegas, El Dorado bench.
Mm-hmm.
They might, if it's someone who tries to, jip you out of your sub, they might say, oh, it's North Las Vegas. Well, if you have the word Las in there, that's not part of the solution. So we know you don't have the correct solution.
Yeah.
Also, it's not necessary that the city comes first. It might be the location that comes first. It might be the item that comes first. So you have to have the exact message, and it will be spelled out for you.
So I did end up purchasing it and started reading it a couple of days ago.
Okay.
And I wish I had something more for you than I have no idea yet, but I'll go back through at some point and maybe figure something out. Hopefully.
I'm looking forward to reading the Star Trek rant, or Star Wars rant that you were talking about. I'm wondering if it's like a little Kevin Smith kind of weird long rant about
the Star Wars rant is chapter 2.
2.
Yeah.
Chapter 2 is the Star Wars rant. Yeah.
Yes.
Each chapter, for your listeners, each chapter kind of has a different, well, first of all, let's go back to the beginning. It's a story about a bunch of, let's call them treasure hunters. It's 3 couples who find an ad on Craigslist, and there's a mysterious benefactor. And the benefactor is leading them around the country to various landmarks. And at the end of every leg of the trip, there's a little quiz or a test for them. And whoever wins that quiz or passes that test, that leg, they would win $10,000. So each chapter kind of focuses on a different team. The first chapter, you kind of get to know all the teams. But the second chapter is more focused on the daughter, the father and the daughter. The father is a retired NASA engineer. The daughter's a teacher. And she goes on this rant about Star Wars. So a large percentage of that chapter is how she thinks Star Wars went wrong, the whole franchise, and how it could have been made better. And then chapter 3, I think, were the 2 girls. They're millennials, they're sisters. And they were talking about, what are they talking about? I've forgotten now. What are they? Oh, they were talking, of course, they're talking about Fenwick Futz, who is kind of a Forrest Fenn sort of character. So that's the Fenwick Futz chapter. And then chapter 4, the one that was solved, that's the One Hit Wonders chapter. And that one follows 2 guys who are friends. One's a real estate investor. One's a retail manager who just quit his job to go on this thing on a whim. They're traveling around trying to solve problems. And so every chapter you have a different topic of conversation. And in chapter 2, it's the Star Wars rant.
And it's in depth.
It's very in-depth.
I was like, wow, this is a lot of information. What made you start with a hint for chapter 4 first? I personally wanted that item to be found first, because that's the one that's closest to home, since that had been there for 8 or 9 years. It was kind of the Genesis item.
that I wanted to be found. So we said, okay, let's do chapter 4. Let's do a hint for that first, and let's get that thing found first. And lucky we did, because you never knew when that kid would have come back and peeled that Z off, right out from under grandma's nose. So so that's why we did chapter 4 first.
Awesome. And I'm actually personally glad that there aren't images in it, just because I will sit and I will pareidolia the heck out of that, or however you pronounce that word. I will find things in there that totally lead me astray. I'm more of a words guy, so I kind of appreciated that part of it. But no, it's
I like art too. I mean, I love art. I love those drawings in The Secret and in Masquerade and in Treasure's Trove, which was another one that was out about 10, 12 years ago, something like that. But the problem with all these books is you want to draw in them, and then you don't want to draw on them. You want to draw lines connecting one thing to another, and then you're ruining your book. So, if you want to solve the thing, you have to draw. So now you've got to buy a second book. And so that was one of the things also, because one, we couldn't afford an artist to draw stuff. But another thing was, let's do something where you don't have to ruin an art book to do it. So that's why yet another reason it's text only.
Yeah. And I also like the fact that it can be done basically with pen and paper. And
you almost have to have pen and paper with you to jot down notes in a notebook, because even knowing the solution, like if your listeners hear, oh, I'm just going to use the initials of one-hit wonders, and you're reading along, it's hard to just look at it, because those pages are small on a Kindle or on an e-reader. So, you probably do have to write down, okay, well, I'm going to write down the title of this, the title of this one-hit wonder, or the artist, or whatever. And eventually in your notebook, now you've written everything down, and now you can put pen and paper to it and try and figure it out. But yeah, I don't think anyone's going to figure out a method just by looking at the Kindle or the e-reader all on its own. I think you're going to have to use pen and paper in a notebook situation.
And then maybe a little bit of Googling of something, but mostly it's just looking at text and trying to figure out what you can glean from it, right?
Well, I do want to mention that there's nothing that you will need to Google to find the method, or someone on another interview said something about a Playfair cipher, because people know a lot of different ciphers, and they thought there was a reference to a Playfair cipher, and there isn't. Also, if a Playfair cipher were used, it would be explained in the book exactly what a Playfair cipher is and how to decode a Playfair cipher. So because that doesn't happen in the book, you're not going to have to use a Playfair cipher. So if you think, oh, I'm going to use some method, I'm going to Google this, don't worry about it. If it's not in the book, then you're not using it. Now, obviously, if you're 2,000 miles away and you decode North Vegas, El Dorado bench, that thing you might have to Google once you have the solution, but the method you will not have to Google.
Nice. Yeah, I saw there was a reference to a Caesar cipher in there.
Right, and I think it's explained, the Caesar cipher is a shift of letters, so that may be possible then. But then, because I don't know the method, that's one thing that a lot of these news reports have assumed that I'm the author, even though clearly the book says the author is Thico DeMaster. That's a pseudonym, but that's a mystery person. We don't want that person to be known. We don't want them bothered. What's the, give me a hint, give me a clue, etc. So it's a cutout. So I wrote the story, but Thico used whatever methods Thico used. In the one-hit wonder chapter, he used one-hit wonders and the artists and the song titles. But he's done 3 completely different methods for the 3 other chapters, but I don't know what those methods are. So while I know what a Caesar cipher is, and I've read the book and a Caesar cipher is referenced, when I read the book, I don't see anything that could be Caesar ciphered, because when you're talking about ciphers, you're talking about blocks of text that are, C, V, Q, L, O, space, E, R, M, S, V. There's no gobbledygook like that in the book. The book is just a plainly written book. So I don't see how a Caesar cipher could work.
Well, that would be pretty easy. It'd be pretty easy to make those. You just take a group of things that are similar and basically do like the one-hit wonders, and then you get a block of letters that work, and take those block of letters and shift them. I don't know if I was supposed to. I don't know if I was supposed to say that. I don't know. Then
don't back off on your Caesar cipher solution. If you can see a way to do it, then it can be done.
Yeah. So that's a good point to make with this, because I definitely, especially with new people coming in from The Secret just to get this book, I don't want them to bombard the Facebook groups and the Twitter groups. One thing that Palancar and that Byron and Joe Allen and Ben, all the people who worked on The Secret, all say is that Byron treated The Secret like the U.S. government's project that was the SR-71 Blackbird, where this huge aircraft was created, but no one creator knew what the other was doing. They just knew their part, and it came together as this huge project. And that's kind of what it sounds like the Great U.S. Treasure Hunt is. You know the story, you know where things are located, but you don't know how to find where those things are located in the story, right?
Right. And I don't have, like, for example, North Vegas El Dorado Bench. I knew it was in North Las Vegas. I didn't know the code would say North Vegas instead of North Las Vegas. I knew it was a Silver Z, but the code could easily have said Silver Z in North Las Vegas under a bench at El Dorado Park. It could have been that. So yeah, I don't.
Well, good. So at least people won't bombard you with requests for hints then.
Right. They'll get a hint January 19th.
They still will.
Yeah,
they still will. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just, okay. So that's interesting. So anytime potential solutions come in, you have to pass them along to Thico. Is that right? Because Thico's the one that would actually know the actual answer.
Well, not if something is in a place that's just flat out where I know something isn't. So if I open an email and someone said, I'm always going to use Cincinnati because I said on another interview that it's not in Cincinnati.
Plus, there's nothing fun in Cincinnati. There's nothing fun there at all.
No.
So, or did I say Cleveland earlier? It was one of those 2 C cities in Ohio. So if I see a solution that says Centennial Park, Cincinnati, I'm looking for a ball of foil. Well, I know that's not it. So I can reply to them, hey, keep trying. Good, interesting, but that's not right.
That would be a kind of a lame treasure hunt. I'm looking for a ball of foil. And
all the items are inconspicuous. In fact, the one reporter that called when I sent the emails out, or the press release out when the person was found, or the item was found, the one reporter that called it an inconspicuous artifact. And I thought, wow, that's really good. They are all inconspicuous artifacts. None of them have necessarily any value whatsoever. They're a little more interesting than a ball of foil, but just barely more interesting than a ball of foil. But it is the kind of thing that if some little kid found it, he might walk away with it. And so if the item is missing, then it's the first person that has the actual solution. So if someone solves something and says, hey, we went to El Dorado Park in North Las Vegas, and here's the solution, North Vegas, El Dorado Bench, Silver Z. We've looked under all these benches, nothing is there. If that happened, then the first person or group to have the accurate solution would then win the money if the item is actually missing. If the item is not missing, if they just missed it, then it's the first person that finds it. And that happened. There was a group that sent someone out Saturday night.
Wow.
And they missed it.
Oh.
I just found out. It's another video on a YouTube channel called Cowlazar, and they had sent a group out and missed searching that bench. For some reason, they got a mind blank that it was only going to be a standalone bench, and where it was stuck was under a picnic bench. There's a gazebo, and there are 3 picnic tables, and obviously picnic tables have to have benches. They're stone benches. When they got there, they had a mind blank. They were only looking at benches, not at picnic benches. So they searched under the benches, looked over, saw the picnic benches, and didn't search them. And then the next morning, that's when Nancy came along and found it.
Wow.
That had to be.
That sounds like
that had to be actually Calazar's too. They live in Vegas. So if he was, that had to be actually him. Oh man, that's gonna suck for him.
A bizarre coincidence. That item, I think I saw on his or on his YouTube. He lives from that park.
Wow.
And that item's been there for 8 years or more. And I mean, if he had won, it would have. I don't want to say. I feel bad to say, oh, I'm glad they didn't win, because I'm not. If they had won, that would have been great. But it would have looked like I was, like we were getting together and let's make a thing that you guys can find. So in a way, I'm like, oh, I'm glad they missed it. I'm not glad they missed it, but what would that have looked like that, oh, somebody creates a treasure hunt and hides something from a known treasure hunt website's house, and then they just go find it. Yeah. So
right.
Person, the person who was destined to find it, found it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gives, you're right. It gives a little bit, there's no risk of losing any credibility or something like that with
right.
Beth and Nancy.
Now they're hot on the entire book. They have Zoom meetings where they get together with 5, 10, 15 people, trying to crack the book. They work on different chapters, which is perfectly fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's, if you've got a group of 5 friends or so and you want to get together and say, hey, let's crack chapter 1 tonight, or let's do chapter 2 or whatever. That's a good strategy. There's still only be 1 check or 2 checks, one for the solver and 1 for the finder, but you can divide it up however you want to. It's just that we won't write, like, if you have a group of 13 friends, we're not going to write 13 different checks for, $600 or whatever that works out to.
Right.
So it'll kind of have to be the agreement between your group of friends.
So, and now we know, based on the instructions at the beginning, that there is no location in play within 500 miles of Vegas, if I read that correctly.
Right. I think we said something like 500 driving miles, which means, maybe a slightly smaller radius than as the crow flies.
Right.
But yeah, you can be safe if you draw a circle 450 miles around Las Vegas as the crow flies.
Right.
And if your solution is within that circle, it's absolutely incorrect.
The awesome thing about this hunt is if you solve one, or if you're at the point to where you're thinking of like getting in a vehicle and going there,
right,
you pretty much know where it is, right? So it's not like people are thinking, oh, like they do with The Secret, like, oh, that must be in Cleveland. And so they start trying to shoehorn Cleveland into everything. You need to actually solve the text puzzle. That'll give you an answer. Then you can send it in, and then you can go there and retrieve the item.
Exactly. Like I said before, if you had Googled North Vegas El Dorado prior to this hunt, now you'll see all those news items. But if you had Googled North Vegas El Dorado, it's going to show you North Las Vegas, Nevada, El Dorado Park. Now the streets Camino El Dorado. So there's other things like the El Dorado Cleaners, the El Dorado Bar and Grill, the El Dorado subdivision. But all of these items are in public places. Mm-hmm. They're hidden. They're not buried. Free parking is nearby. You can walk over. There's no entry fees. It is public property, not private property. So it's not the El Dorado Cleaners. It's not the El Dorado housing subdivision. It's El Dorado Park.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know where you're going.
That's great. And just one last note on the instructions. We know that there are items on either side of the 40th parallel, right?
Yeah, both north and there's still 3 items left, both north
Right.
and south of the 40th parallel, and both
Right.
east and west of the Mississippi.
Right.
So they are truly nationwide.
Right. So there's at least one. Wait, is Vegas north or south of the 40th parallel?
It is south, but there's still at least one south and
Right.
at least one north and at
Exactly.
least one east and west of the Mississippi.
So that's about the biggest clue that you're going to get from our podcast is just
Well,
by,
even then, it doesn't help you because
no, it doesn't.
you could walk out tomorrow and just start searching in a public park, and if you find something, you're not going to know it has any connection to the hunt at all. It literally could be a rolled up ball of foil. Well, slightly better than. But if you then just send us an email, hey, how about this piece of trash that I picked up? I found this little doohickey. Don't do that. Don't send us pictures of doohickeys you find in parks. Decode the message first, and it'll tell you where to go and what to find.
I don't know, David. I'm going to send you all my pictures of doohickeys. Every doohickey that I
don't
find.
want doohickey pictures.
Sounds like you got George's emails then.
Can I? You made a really good point about Mike. About I shouldn't say Mike. About Calazars. Since we have you on the podcast, there are members of the podcast team that are working on your treasure hunt, like our friend Bradley, who is not on the episode now because he's working on the hunt, and we didn't want it to look, like you were giving hunts or hints. Would you be willing to say, for the record, the podcast team has gotten no hints that's not going to be in this? There's nothing that we were given.
Yeah, there are no hints given by me or anyone else on any of my interviews anywhere.
Nice.
And that's one of the reasons that, I know where all the items are, but I'm not going to come out and say, hey, don't look here or don't look there. Although I've said don't look in Cincinnati. So if that can be considered a hint, then that's a hint. And it's well known that California is not a location. So it's not California or Cincinnati, apparently. So nice. Anything else is up for grabs.
And you said Cleveland too. Don't forget that.
I might have said Cleveland. It's either Cleveland. I forget.
Let's just say it's not. Just try to stay out of Ohio. No. Ohio is just a horrible place. Just don't go there.
There's still many, many places in America it can be.
So, and I think, and just to, I want to sort of close out by talking about you personally. You, even just from reading this article, I was immediately drawn by your story and your inspirations, and I'm like, this guy sounds super cool. Which is why we reached out to you. Tell us a little bit. I know you like puzzles and anagrams and ciphers, and I know you're into The Secret and The Masquerade. I know you like poker. I'm a huge poker fan. What else? Poker. What poker's awesome.
Well, I ran an escape room for 5 years, Escape Room Leander, and you're creating codes and clues and puzzles there.
Yes. And
I tried to keep the rooms fresh, so I had to come up with different things all the time. That's a completely different than this hunt, in the sense that I had to create puzzles that could be solved within an hour. And here we had to try to put together a team where within the restrictions of having a text-only solution, that the directions were accurate, but also couldn't just be solved in an hour. So working with our author, we kind of bounced some ideas back and forth, and without my knowing the exact method of how things are decoded, I'm kind of happy that the first one did take more than 30 days, and that there's still 3 things out there to be solved, and hopefully we've made it hard enough that it's not instantly solvable, but easy enough that when you look back on it, you say, oh yeah, okay, there you go, that's fair. Like the one-hit wonders, they're right there. All the letters come out in order if you take the songs and the artists, so there's nothing too hard about that. But yeah, I love poker as well. That's one of the reasons the thing is in Vegas. And then I would
Yeah.
check on it every year or so. I would go there to watch the World Series of Poker. And then I'd drive up, every year or two, check on that bench, see if that Z was still there. And it was. And the reason I say I'm not sure exactly when the item was hidden, all I know is definitely it was at least 1 or 2 years before Ryan Reese won the World Series of Poker, because I happen to have watched the final table when Ryan Reese won. And so I think that was 2013, which means that the item was hidden in 2011
right.
or 2012.
Yep, 2013.
So yeah, poker, you're trying to figure out, what does your opponent have? What story is he telling? Does it make any sense? Does he really have a flush? Because he's telling the story of a flush, but I don't know. Does he really have that? So there's odds, and how much do you bet? So anything having to do with numbers or solving things, puzzles, that's just me.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah, and poker is definitely one of those types of puzzles. Did you ever play in the World Series of Poker?
I did, but not in the big 10K one. A friend of mine, that when I used to work for a home builder, he said, "Hey, I'm going to play a bunch of numbers for you." And again, here comes coincidence into play. He says, "I'm going to play a bunch of numbers for you, and if I win, I'm going to send you to the World Series of Poker." I was like, "Okay, haha, great." So he played the numbers. I think it was 624, and a couple weeks go by. He goes, "I've still got those numbers for you." I said, "Okay, great." One day, I see the number 624 on the screen. I never watched the drawing of the whatever game this was, and I see the number 624. I was like, that's interesting. Those are the numbers Mike's playing for me. So, and this is not Mike from the Calazar. It's a completely different Mike. There's many Mikes in the world. Don't go conspiracy theory. I know there's already people out there going, "Oh, it's Mike." So Mike, the non-Calazar, I call him and I say, "Hey, 624. Did I win like $500? Because that was the payoff. It's a $500 payoff." And he said, "No. In order for you to get into the World Series of Poker in a $1,500 event, you'd have to have $1,500. Plus, you'd have to get there, and you'd have to have a hotel room." He won $2,100 and handed it to me.
Wow.
And that's how I played in the World Series of Poker.
That's
how
awesome.
they say your knees get weak? That's the only time in my life my knees were literally weak. I was standing up when he called, and he says, "No," and my knees started to buckle. It was just unbelievable.
Wow.
But yeah, he had played, I think, 3 solid weeks. I think this game was played 2 or 3 times a week, and he played these numbers all the way up almost until the date that you would play. And yeah, he handed me the ticket. I cashed it, went to Vegas, and that is when I hid that Z. So thanks to Mike Foster, this treasure hunt has a very interesting first ending with a Z under a bench in El Dorado Park.
All full circle. And then, of course, somebody random playing bingo also found the Z somehow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So the lesson, kids, if you're listening, the lesson is go gamble as much as possible.
Yes, gamble, and when you find something gross under a bench,
leave
grab
it alone.
Leave it alone. I'm sorry.
Leave it alone, because if someone stuck it there on purpose, you don't want to have your dirty hands on it. You want to let the nice lady come and find it and win part of $10,000.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
We've still got 3 items out there. They are worth $10,000 each. We do have hints every 30 days. The next one is coming up on January 19th, and we'll throw bonus hints out there. We have said that we want this thing wrapped up by this next spring, summer, because we want to do it again bigger. We want to do at least 6 next time instead of just 4, because we already had the 10 ready to go. So we want to do another 6. We want to have this one wrapped up before we start the next one. It is the Great U.S. Treasure Hunt ebook on Amazon, less than $10, and take a shot at it.
Do you have a website address?
It is thegreatustreasurehunt.com.
Okay.
But I think the easiest way to find it is if you just go to Amazon and search The Great U.S. Treasure Hunt, it'll pop up there, and it's like, one click buy.
Yeah. We'll throw links to all of your social media and to buy the book in the podcast description as well. So if anybody's curious, look down below. It'll be there.